Guys who married Bridezillas, what happened after the wedding? Story 1. I was called the Bridezilla. After getting back with my ex-boyfriend I broke up with from high school, his parents got into his head that he should propose. His parents got married at the age of 19, and they thought that since we're 19, we should follow in their footsteps. We were only back together for 1 month at that point. Nothing against anyone that married young or married suddenly. But he proposed, and I was excited because this is supposed to be an important moment in my life, and I can plan the beautiful wedding that I've always dreamed of. I immediately started to look at venues since we only had 10 months to plan. His mom complained to everyone behind my back that I was planning too soon. His family are strict Catholics, so when I said that I didn't want to have a mass for our wedding, they made sure the priest talked to me to convince me to change my mind. When I planned to go wedding dress shopping, she complained again about how I was doing it too soon, now 8 months out from the wedding. And then she brought some of her kids without asking me. And on top of that, I invited a mutual friend of ours, and I got a text from that friend on my way to the bridal shop asking if she could bring her friends, because my fiance's mom told her to. His mom also got mad at me for not including all 7 of her daughters in the wedding party. Whenever I tried to plan wedding stuff with my fiance, he couldn't handle it because planning the proposal took too much energy out of him, and that lasted a few months. Whenever his family tried controlling the wedding, I got bothered because they were planning around themselves. They said that this isn't about me and my fiance, it's about their family. And because their family is a big deal and this wedding was about them. Overall, they called me Bridezilla to my face multiple times because I didn't like how they were controlling my wedding. Within those few months, I remembered why I broke up with my fiance the first time. So, I broke up with him again. F that. Way to get the heck out of that family for good. Because I can see how a family might think of a wedding as more of a family affair, but ultimately, all of those wedding decisions need to be made by the bride and groom. It's their day, and everyone else is just along for the ride. Family has a tendency to use guilt and other things to control and wear you down. And then, you just feel exhausted and start giving in to their demands. Good for this woman for standing up for herself. Story 2. First wife was a bridezilla. During the honeymoon, she realized she was married, and the wedding day was history. She wanted the big wedding, which she had, not the marriage. The next 2 years were hell until she finally tapped out. I was young and stupid, and the thought of divorce never crossed my mind. I don't know why it didn't. I guess I just assumed I'd be miserable the rest of my life. When she told me she was leaving, it felt as if the weight of the world was off of my shoulders. On a happy note, her parents were still paying off the wedding when we divorced. And that's what happens when you allow your daughter everything she wanted, including 2 wedding dresses. Story 3. Not married, but I ended a friendship with a bridezilla who desperately wanted me to attend her wedding. She had scheduled it for the weekend of the eclipse in 2017, something I had planned for 10 years. She asked me what my plan was, and I said that I'm flying to the Missouri-Kentucky area. She wanted me to fly to Idaho, where she lived. I would have, but all flights, hotels, and rental cars in Idaho and Utah were completely booked out. I couldn't get there even if I wanted to. She said I didn't care about her or her wedding and that I didn't want to see her on her big day. She claimed I put the eclipse, something I had planned on seeing for 10 years prior, before her wedding, which is something I knew about for 6 months. So, I ended things really fast after that. But from what I see, she still posts photos of her wedding to this day. Like, every day, she posts different wedding photos. It's almost like she stopped living after her wedding. I think this is far too often the case with some brides. There is such a big deal made about their wedding day that once it's over, they lose a sense of purpose now that they aren't the center of attention anymore. No doubt that social media has made this problem far worse because you can just fan the flames of your wedding day by reposting and reposting. It's all very immature. Besides, the big eclipse of 2017 sounds way more interesting and memorable than a bridezilla's wedding. Story 4. I have performed a few ceremonies that came about because things fell through for whatever reason. Only one of which I had to walk away from. I had received a call from my sister-in-law that one of her friends was supposed to be getting married, and the priest had passed away the week before. They didn't want to change the date and move anything, so they had asked if she knew anyone who could help out. I said, sure. When is the wedding? It was supposed to be in an hour. Okay, I was on my way home from work, where I had finished up an important meeting. I missed the meeting in person and was reasonably well dressed, so I called home to say I was going to be late. When I arrived, the happy couple had looked at me and asked if I had proper priest vestments. No, I don't, and if I did, I probably would not be carrying them in my car. The bride then asked if I was able to go buy some and come back. I told her that I wouldn't begin to know where to buy something like that. The groom then told me if I can't even try, then maybe I should leave. So I did. My sister-in-law told me they cornered a priest at the church and told him he had to marry them or they would sue the church for a breach of contract and that it was the moral thing to do. Yeah, they divorced 9 months later when her surprise baby was a different ethnicity than he was. Didn't help that he had a side piece as well. Story 5. My sister was a bridezilla. She asked me to be her bridesmaid, and the dresses were hundreds of dollars and my mom ended up paying for it because she knew I couldn't afford it. $70 in alterations later and the stupid dress finally fit. I lived in Edmonton at the time, and my sister was in Abbotsford, British Columbia by Vancouver. She demanded I fly down for her bachelor party. Fine. $300 for a flight there, and my boyfriend drove out for the wedding and picked me up. $200 gas there, $200 back. The party was a week before the wedding, so when I flew down, I just stayed until the wedding. Stayed with my mom until my sister kicked me out of the night before the wedding. Wanted a special night with her 2 maids of honor. I was the only bridesmaid and therefore couldn't be there. During the bachelor party, I was told I needed to bring booze for myself and the bride. Fine. Went to the liquor store and she ran up $100 on my card with what she wanted. Whatever, it's her wedding. Proceeds to drink none of it, went to bed at the hotel early because she was pissy for some reason, then gave my alcohol, all $100 of it, to her husband for his bachelor party the next night. Okay, fine. Then she gets pissy that my gift for them wasn't off her registry. I looked at the registry and there was nothing under $200. She even put a $900 vacuum on there. Then has the balls to get angry that I was a bridesmaid and didn't spend enough on her. All said and done, her stupid wedding cost me over $1,000, and like I said, my mom paid the $300 for my dress. She then didn't speak to me for years after, and only to tell me that she didn't want me as a bridesmaid and that I had ruined her wedding. That she only asked me out of courtesy, and that the spot was actually meant for her wedding planner, our cousin. I don't know if she's happily married or not, we don't keep in touch. Her wedding ruined our relationship. Story 6. My brother married a bridezilla. She yelled at my mother the day of for asking where she wanted certain decorations at the reception site. There wasn't a written plan, so my mom had nothing to go off of. Then never thanked my parents for financially contributing to the wedding. Accused a bridesmaid of trying to upstage her by getting a spray tan before the wedding. And my brother wanted me to be in the wedding party. But she told him to his face that I was too pretty to be in the wedding party and all of her bridesmaids had to be less attractive than her. Stole my sister-in-law's jacket in the middle of the reception, literally took it off her back because one of the bridesmaids was cold. It was a night reception in the spring. The girl should have brought a jacket. And the list goes on. Well, they got divorced about a year later because apparently her demanding attitude carried over into the marriage. Needless to say, the rest of my family had a little party when we heard about the divorce. Sometimes the best thing that someone can do is to create a little starter marriage for themselves. You get a year to confirm how you want to be treated in a marriage, and it's before you have any kids, so really no harm, no foul. At least that brother got out of the marriage relatively quickly, but the biggest bummer is all of the wasted money that was blown on this wedding. The only winners were the venue, photographer, and caterer. Story 7. My cousin was married to one. He comes from a very not wealthy area and has become successful himself after moving out of his hometown. His wife was extremely wealthy, even could say excessively. They married after a year of knowing each other, and boy was it a surprise to hear about the wedding plans. They spent $250,000 on the wedding, including catering by 5 to 7 different restaurants. Their food was from different cultures and cooked in front of you. Think almost like a hibachi buffet style. They even had servers in tailed suits and white gloves serving Taco Bell after midnight once everyone was drunk. Once they got married, she was spending more money than he could make. She was getting mad because he wasn't making enough while she wasn't working and they hadn't had kids. They got divorced and she gave him the ultimatum of giving his ring back or keeping the dog. He kept the dog. Her sister, a lawyer, helped her file a restraining order on him and they haven't spoken since. But man, did he dodge a bullet. Story 8. I married a bridezilla. He is a lovely, sweet, thoughtful man, but boy, did he lose it surrounding the wedding. I could have been married with about 3 special people there. He needed 200 plus. Now, as far as I was concerned, we could eat off paper plates and napkins and have a big bonfire to burn them afterwards. He needed personalized moist hollowets. You get the point. He is a lovely person and I love him dearly, but I will never marry him again. Story 9. Married a Bridezilla. In the 18 months that we were married, she was such an unfit mother, too many instances to list here, and when the divorce was finalized, I got custody of our kid and the kid that she had prior to our marriage. Also, she was a blackout drunk and cheated on me with several different men. Final straw was when I had to travel out of state to check on my grandmother. I came back a day early, saw used Marlboros in the ashtray, not her brand, and I don't smoke, and then I heard grunting and groaning in the bedroom. Yep, there she was, and there he was, and there he was. Contacted a divorce lawyer the next day, finalized it as fast as possible. Story 10. First marriage was to a Bridezilla. Got drunk before the ceremony, wouldn't dance because she was too anxious that people would make fun of her, tried bragging to my cousins during the dinner that our wedding was better than theirs, the 4 of us got married in a 2-year span, and invited her ex-boyfriend to the ceremony, that I later found out that she had been sleeping with both before and after our wedding. She took the money we had received as gifts and were planning on using for a house down payment and then spent it on random crap, had a ton of debt that she kept from me. Left her a year after to the day and never looked back. Now happily married to a great woman. Obviously hindsight, yada yada, but there were a lot of red flags that I should have noticed. Big things after the wedding, like spent money more quickly than she could make it. I ended up having to take on a second job, already working 50+ hours a week just to cover bills. She got into bad habits and stopped going to work, and would go visit her friends in the evenings, which I found out later was just her going to her boyfriends. Final straw was when I found out what she was doing with the money. Now, I didn't know at first that she was into drugs, but online payments of bills weren't as popular when we were married, so I would give her the money to go pay some during banking hours. One day, got pulled over and charged with no insurance on my vehicle, and it turns out she was taking the money for bills and buying drugs. When the notices for no payment would come in the mail, she would hide them or rip them up. Handed her separation papers on our 1-year anniversary. A lot of victims of Bridezillas probably feel dumb at times that they ignored all the warning signs leading up to the wedding. But that's easier said than done, really. Because when you're planning a wedding, and now all the family is invested in it and looking forward to it, it's hard to just walk away and cancel everything. You feel the pressure to move forward and move on, and write it off, and maybe it's just nerves or something like that. In the comments, anybody else ignore some spouse warning signs, and what were they? Story 11. I had a mother-in-law-zilla, does that count? She had insisted that she was a traditionalist, and as I was marrying her daughter, she would be paying for the whole deal. That was fine with my wife, and so it was fine with me. She took no significant further role in the planning process, which my wife did all of, other than paying the bills as they arose. Very late in the game, like a month before after 18 months of planning, my wife sent her the seating plan just to make sure it would be workable. She calls, and after what sounds like a robust discussion, my wife comes to me and tells me that her mother isn't happy with the seating plan and demands that she will sit at the bridal table or she's pulling away her money, which would have resulted in us wearing significant cancellation fees, etc. I asked for the phone, and I asked my mother-in-law to explain the problem to me. She gets very emotive, starts ranting about how it's the tradition she wanted to follow, which no one knew about and I haven't seen at any family wedding since, and that she was going to withdraw her money if she didn't have her way. I took a second to consider my options and told her that it was fine. Fortunately, a seat at the bridal table had just opened up and that she could have it. It was mine. I wouldn't be needing it. I hung up the phone and handed it back to my wife and told her she'd call back. She did and sat where she was told. She had another outburst on the morning of the wedding that I wasn't privy to, something about going into a massive screaming fit about not having enough helium to inflate the balloons. She ordered the helium, and then blamed my brother-in-law for having used the helium for recreational purposes the night before, which I've had explained to me didn't happen. Apparently that was a cracker. The story gets retold often amongst her children at family gatherings, amongst tales of her other ridiculous escapades. Story 12. My wife totally took over our wedding plans, but to be fair, I just let her do it, and I could see how much her perfect day meant, and to be honest, there was very little I would have changed anyway. We have very similar tastes. 17 years on, we have discussed it, and she genuinely thought we had come to joint decisions over everything. I pointed out that she booked a band and DJ from a magazine, even though I worked for an entertainment agency and knew some much better artists, and it kind of hit home. We agreed that for our 20th anniversary, we would arrange a celebration together. At the end of the day, it is the celebration and the people that make a day special. If you get that right, the details are just not important. Story 13. My dad was married many times, and he was very secretive about it. I didn't know about his previous kids until I was an adult. One of his wives was a bridezilla. She had it in her mind that my toddler son and her toddler granddaughter would walk down the aisle hand in hand. They didn't even know each other or met before the wedding, and no rehearsal. I was in the back room that she would walk out from, and she's trying to force the hand-holding. Everyone's seated and ready for the ceremony, so I just put a stop to it. Then her poor granddaughter doesn't want to put down her bear. The poor girl's mom and grandmother are now screaming at her, and everyone can hear it. I handed my son a stuffed animal from the car and said, "There, now they match." I go out and sit. The little kids come out and do their walk. And then the previously hysterical grown woman who'd been screaming at a baby about a bear came out. To Unchained Melody, they sang it to each other as she came across the room. I had smoked out with my brothers and their wives beforehand, so it was everything we could do to keep our stuff together. That song has been ruined for us all. They were married a couple years and everything was her way. At one point, she demanded I spank my daughter for refusing to call her grandma, and after a while, my dad started having injuries, falling from ladders and such. He'd never been to the ER more in his life than when he was married to her. Finally, she hit him with her car, backed up, looked him in the eye and said, "Bet that hurt," and drove away. My dad made my husband help him move out while she was away for the day. But to be fair, my dad is incredibly narcissistic, selfish, a chronic liar, and a serial cheater. It was honestly funny to watch him have to put up with someone worse than him. In the card, I wrote that I was glad that they found each other. Are we to believe that the other injuries, other than being hit by the car, were caused by this evil woman? Like, if he fell off the ladder and ended up in the ER, was that just an excuse, or was she sabotaging the ladder or something? Frankly, spending all that time in the ER seems way more relaxing and peaceful than being around this hag of a woman anyway. This is a good example that sometimes crazy attracts crazy, and then all hell breaks loose, leaving the family to observe and just facepalm their way through it. Story 14. I was in her wedding and she was a coworker I barely knew. When she asked me, I said yes because I thought it was sad. She must not have many people to ask and is doing it out of desperation. This would be the last time I ever agree to do it for anyone. It was a year of hell. She called constantly. I think like we had 6 different dress dates all out of town. She took up every weekend for a year and cost all of us so much money. Hair, makeup, nails, shoes, dress fittings. She wanted the best of the best. Every outing included a lunch and tons of drinks that the bridesmaids were expected to pay because she's getting married. It was so many arguments, tears, her calling us all at our work. In this time, I had found a better job, and I hated her by the end. I went to the wedding and watched her scream and cry all day. She had bought a dress a size smaller, expecting to lose weight, but not doing it, so we couldn't get the back zipped up. Someone came up with the idea to go out and buy a white fur shawl to wrap around her. It looked cute, and yep, she got married in an unzipped dress. She also spent hours telling the rest of us that we must have had them alter our dresses bigger so that we could fit in them. It was wild, but we got that woman married. I was the first to leave. We watched her cut the cake and then left, and I swore to never talk to her again, as did most of the wedding party. She called me 1.5 years later, telling me that the guy had left her, and she was in a ton of debt from the wedding, and then started complaining that the only reason I was friends with the girl from the wedding was because of her, and how crappy we were for going to the beach and then not inviting her. She also hinted that we kind of owed her for the wedding debt because we didn't stop her from overspending. You guys were supposed to be my friends, and you knew I didn't have the money. Why would you do that? Yeah, I hung up and blocked her number.